everybody, to our Parrot Stars podcast. My name is Alexis Highland. I am the manager at Parrot Stars. And as always, I'm here with Ashley and Avery, who work with me at Parrot Stars.
Hello.
And no, none of my parrots want to partake in the podcast today. So we tried both. Neither of them wanted to hang out on their tree stand, despite the nutriberries and pine nuts that are in the cup. But such is life. That's their choice. So we are continuing our conversation about clicker training, introducing it, what it is. So we started our conversation about positive reinforcement training. We went through what positive reinforcement training is, the benefits of using it. So that's in a previous episode. So if you want to kind of listen to the full series, feel free to jump back a couple episodes to hear about what positive reinforcement is. Then we kind of dove into like planning your positive reinforcement training sessions. And all of that came before introducing the clicker. So we're starting to now get into like what the actual clicker is, why it's such a useful tool. So kind of the running theme throughout these episodes has been kind of like, what are the tools necessary for positive reinforcement training? So the first one that we introduced is the cage, having a large enclosure, using the cage as a tool to kind of help your parrot feel really secure, help you avoid getting bit, and creating that mutual bond and trust in a really controlled environment and setting. Then we introduced that the clicker is a tool used to signal to the bird the exact moment that it's done something correctly. So again, clicker is a little box that makes a click noise. And when you click it, it makes a very unique and distinct sound. And how we finished the last episode is that the clicker is meant to be clicked when you're first introducing it at the exact moment that the parrot touches the treat. And then that is going to start to make the association within the bird's mind that every time it hears the click, it knows it's done a wanted behavior, or that whatever behavior it was doing when they heard the click is going to result in a treat. Listen back to the previous episodes if you want to kind of catch up to where we're going to take our conversation today. But I wanted to kind of circle back. So we mentioned in the previous episodes, like the value of planning the interactions. So if one of you kind of want to go into like the value of, again, taking your time to plan, making sure you have your tools, but then like, how do we know if our parrot is like done with the training session?
So whenever I do training, whether it's a bird that's very experienced with clicker training or a brand new bird, part of my planning is making sure I have that clicker ready. I have the treats. If this is in-cage training, then just making sure there's not a ton of external distractions around me. Maybe I have the TV off, things like that. And then I always start off by just reinforcing what the clicker is going to do. Again, it could be a very seasoned bird that's been training with me for a long time. I still begin with, here's the treat, they take it, I click, just to really reinforce
this is
time to train, and this is what it means, and this is what happens when we hear that sound. And then I know we spent some time talking about setting goals too before you go into it. So maybe your goal is simply, I need the bird to take the treat from me. If you're starting to have some success that way, it could be getting the bird to move across to the other side of the cage to take that treat, or to different areas of the cage to take that treat. And again, clicking to reward, but having a goal in mind rather than kind of winging it as you go into it, being very thoughtful and intentional with your practice with your bird.
And just to reiterate, there's differences between those goals and expectations.
Yes.
And so depending on your progress previously with your bird, if any, one day might be different from the next day. And so it's just important when you're getting started, introducing the clicker, or even just starting your routine, you're kind of reading your bird's body language. Maybe yesterday it was great. Or, they were so into the training routine, but today maybe they're just not into it. Or there's something else happened and they're just a little distracted. You just kind of have to keep that in mind before you really dive into the training routine for that day.
Yeah, because every day, every training session might look different. We might take 5 steps forward and 4 steps back. But I like that you mentioned body language, because that can be one of our biggest indicators as to how our bird is feeling about that training session, how receptive they are to continuing. So, 3 to 5 minutes is our sweet spot. But if you find that your bird is kind of backing away or losing interest prematurely, it arguably is more important to end on that positive note rather than pushing just to meet a time marker. So I'm glad you mentioned body language.
Yeah, and I think another big component of it is like considering time of day or routine. So when you're trying to, like, okay, you've got the ball rolling and you're like, okay, I'm starting to introduce the clicker. I've done my sitting in the chair. The bird is now used to me. I've now gotten it to take some treats out of my hand. Now we're ready to start introducing the clicker and having more like really intentional training sessions. Take into consideration the time of day. So, did your parrot just eat a full meal because it's just after breakfast? Maybe not the best time to try to do something that requires food motivation. So, one strategy that we recommend is trying to do it before you do your replenishment of dry food. Now, depending on everybody's schedule, obviously, we want to try to encourage you to get vegetables and sprouts into the cage first thing in the morning as early as you can. And we don't want to take away from that. But again, we're recommending that these training sessions are only a couple minutes long. So if you're an early bird or you're really, really motivated and you want to see some results, maybe you try to do like that 3-minute training session right before you put the veggies in, where you know with certainty this is going to be the moment that my parrot's food drive is absolutely as high as it's going to be all day. Now, we want to get the veggies in there right away. Birds have fast metabolisms. We don't want to like sacrifice one really important aspect of parrot care in order to achieve something else. But it does help to have food motivation. And I think that's another part where I hear frustration from customers is like, there may be no positive reinforcement training and have been really successful with training dogs using positive reinforcement training, but not so much with birds. And it's just with dogs because more often than not, I mean, some people free feed where the dog has access to food. For the most part, dogs are eating designated portioned meals, and you can really exploit their hunger and like use their food motivation and their food drive. And because dogs are so treat motivated, because we've domesticated them, like they'll stick with you longer for a treat. Whether they are really hungry or not, the treat is kind of like the taste and the smell. There's other motivators there. And parrots, not always as simple to kind of get that food drive as high as it can be. So starting it first thing in the morning, having a little bit of portion control, and I want to, again, be careful because I don't want people to kind of go too extreme. But when they have free and clear access to a heaping bowl of seeds and nuts throughout the day, trying to get them to take seeds or nuts as their reinforcer food treat, probably going to be pretty hard to do. So we, as at the store, just in general, recommend a really balanced diet of lots of vegetables, sprouts, seeds, nuts, and naturally colored pellets. But having a good portion that's like not heaping handfuls of food, but more appropriate for the time of day that you're trying to offer it, so that the bird isn't just pigging out all day long when you're trying to do this clicker training, is hopefully going to help kind of maintain the bird's motivation for the treats a little bit longer than average.
2 recommendations I usually give folks if they're unsure about food motivators, because it can be hard to find something to really incentivize the birds to do what we're asking, is to try variety packs, whether it's dried fruits, nuts, seed, whatever it might be. Usually they're hungriest first thing in the morning. So from your variety pack, putting like a pile of each ingredient on a paper towel, get that in the cage, see what the bird kind of goes to first each time is a good way to pick it out. And then the second bit of advice is when we do find that incentivizer, maybe not having it be easily accessible all day long in the cage. So I use pine nuts with my personal bird, and at the store a lot, the shelled pine nuts for training. And if you were to look at all of our bird cages, there's no pine nuts sitting in their foraging toys or in their food dishes, simply because it's not special if it is. And if they can easily go and just pull that out of their dish, why would they push themselves and challenge themselves to, try a novel concept?
Yep.
So try your variety packs if you're really uncertain, and then really designate that treat for training so it is special and it does incentivize them to do what we're asking.
Yeah.
And not to maybe get ahead too much, but another thing that I notice a lot of people do at the store, when we give treats to guests that they can hand to the bird, of course, they're not doing it for training purposes.
Right.
But also, I notice it during an actual training dedicated workshop back when our Parrot Wizard visited for the summer festival, is proportion of treat.
Oh, yes.
And obviously, for just wanting to make a friend, sure, give them the whole walnut or something like that. But for training wise, especially with the small birds, is you want to have very small quantities
Yep.
of these treats. Maybe it's pine nuts or dried fruit that you have to maybe break apart. The whole concept is to keep coming back for more. You don't want to give them the
Absolutely.
whole walnut, and then you waste those 3 to 5 minutes in general of them just sitting there eating it.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I think just to highlight it one more time, when you're first starting, a whole half of a walnut, wonderful. But what you're describing is like once we've kind of moved to that next stage to avoid the losing the food drive, tiny pieces.
Yeah, even little walnuts pine nuts are small, but I even break
Still
them.
break 'em.
Yeah, I still break them apart.
Yeah, and I think that's why we commonly use the walnut, the pine nut, and the dried fruit is because you're not creating more work. You can break them apart with your fingers.
Yeah.
Things like almonds, pistachios, safflower seeds, you can't necessarily break apart. I mean, and it might slow down the process. So if you can manipulate them in your fingertips and break them apart into smaller pieces, that really helps.
Yeah, that is a big one. So we've established sitting and just kind of getting your bird acclimated. We've established introducing the cage as a safe place, never a punishment. We've introduced the clicker and then the treats. And I think now we have to look at potential environment of where the bird is in the home. And this goes case by case basis. Usually, we would recommend that your bird is in an environment where it will be for the long term, where it will get used to. But depending on maybe how you read your bird when you're first taking it home, or if you have like an open floor plan and 2-story high ceilings, and you set the cage right there in the family room, maybe it's not the best environment with little to no distraction for that training routine.
Yep.
So let's say you have a ringneck and very shy, not immediately ready to jump on your finger. A smaller room with less distractions. So if there ever is like a little mistake where, the ringneck just flies out all of a sudden, as soon as you open that door, it's not as chaotic of an environment.
I think chaotic is a good way of putting it. Like you're trying to like make everything as controlled. I mean, there's going to be no perfect training session.
Of course.
But yes, giving people the option of like saying it's okay to temporarily have them in a smaller room is a really good point that you made, because there's no right or wrong way of doing this. Like with the exception of like, don't use your hands as physical punishment. Obviously. Like there's the big no-nos.
Yes.
But like you have to be able to be flexible to figure out what's working and functional for you. So yes, the ringneck is a phenomenal example because parrots are prey animals and they have an intense fight or flight instinct. So that if they're nervous, their body registers a stressful moment as like, I got to get out of the situation, get me to safety as quick as I can. So their impulse or their instinct is to just fly in whatever direction they can. And so, yeah, we hear that feedback kind of a lot is like, well, what do I do if my parrot gets out of the cage? Well, if you have a parrot that isn't as predictable where it's going to like more or less stay in the spot that it's sitting when you have to change papers or change a toy or give new food or water, if you have a really, really flighty or nervous bird, okay, it's okay to move them to a smaller room if you need to.
Yeah, or even if it's just a very like high energy distracting environment, like with our residents. We don't do our training in the middle of our showroom. If you've been to Parrot Stars, it's a room full of birds. So oftentimes we're stepping into our smaller visit room adjacent to showroom, or we're going into our education room, which is a little quieter, but we are going to areas that are just less distracting simply because our environment has a lot of distractions in it.
A lot of sound.
Yeah.
So another component that will essentially maybe become crucial in the future to really minimize as much distraction as possible, and this goes for your day 1 bird or your day 5,000 bird, is, and it's good to start early by introducing it early, but a training stand or a T stand, as they're called. It's just a very minimalistic pole that holds a very minimalistic perch. So your perch isn't filled with toys. It's not, it's just a stick on a stand. And that's the best environment to have a training session because there's little to zero distraction. And obviously, while your bird's first in the cage, when acclimating to a new environment, you never would just want to grab your bird, put it on the training stand, and think because it's dedicated training stand that your bird will understand that.
Yep.
Good point.
So maybe getting one right off the bat is a great idea, and just having it nearby.
Yep.
Having it stand next to the cage, having it on a table that your bird can see it. Maybe you mess with it. Maybe you touch it, show it's not a scary thing. Obviously, you're not picking up, playing with it, showing that it's something the bird chews apart or has fun time on it. You're just doing it slowly to minimize distraction, but have a good quality training session.
Yeah, and I think there is value in having your ducks in a row early, and because parrots are so intimidated. And I'm so glad you mentioned that because even I could not be more impressed or happy with Rascal, the scarlet macaw that I've been working with for 6 years. When we've really taken the initiative in the last year and a half to push our own birds into more systematic and thoughtful training sessions, to this day, she still is a little bit more nervous on the training stand than if she's on the back of a chair or if she's on a tree stand. And that's with me really taking my time with her. And so that's a seasoned adult bird that still is nervous standing on the T-stand because the support feels different. The texture is different. She doesn't have that kind of sense of security that she can go anywhere. So yes, you need to kind of think ahead and start showing them all of the things that you're going to eventually need throughout. So even though for the sake of this discussion, we're not going to go into this out of cage time that the training T-stand is going to be useful. But once we've introduced the clicker, it's time to introduce the stand, just like what you said, to let them see it. So you're not okay, we've done really great clicker training sessions. The bird knows what the clicker is. We're about to introduce the target and what that means. Maybe you've done some target training and now we're okay, we're ready to open the cage door. And then you're boom, here's a huge brand new object that you need to figure out. Let's start thinking proactively about what our next steps are going to look like over the course of our training.
You're one step ahead of Murphy's Law.
Yep.
At least trying to be.
Exactly. The little Lucky is making his presence be known in
over
our
there laughing
podcast room right now. He's making a scary laugh. Okay. So yeah, we've kind of I think gotten you guys to a stage that we've talked about the advantages of introducing the clicker and what the noise represents. So now we're ready to take it to the next stage, which would be introducing a target stick. So if one of you could describe what the target stick is and why it's such a valuable tool.
So the target stick kind of looks like a chopstick. If you are getting a target stick that's designed to be a target stick, it differs in that there is a very fine point on one end compared to chopsticks that we eat with. And the point of using this tool is it's something that's very neutral and it's going to help the bird learn what to move towards or what to touch. So it's an excellent tool for encouraging our birds to come move towards us, especially if we're practicing step up. It's an even better tool if you're someone who's had the bird for a while and you're maybe getting into some undesirable behaviors. It's something that is just like the clicker, designated to training. It's not a perch or a
Right.
toy or anything that is used outside of the training session. That way, when we go to begin, we have that clicker, we have our target stick, our eventual T-stand. All of these things indicate to the bird it's time to learn, it's time to train. So again, we're giving them that predictability and clarity there.
And again, even if you're not using it right off the bat, which I mean, I guess you can. We can't tell you what to do, but you shouldn't. It's just having it still, maybe.
You know what I think the Parrot Wizard mentioned that I'll give him credit for because I forgot that he did this is I think, didn't he mention he has everything like on a little like side table
Oh, yeah.
next to the bird's cage?
That's
Yeah.
actually what I do with my bird too.
So I think like there's just like what we just recommended with the T-stand.
Exactly. Yeah.
They can see everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have it
So
in the
just
line of
having
sight.
it around, you're not using it yet, but you're just saying, here's a little stick. And this is going to be a part of your life eventually. So
Exactly.
get used to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And with the target stick, again, we're not trying to drive you guys nuts, but there is so much value in like working your kinks out as an individual human before you're trying to do it in front or with the parrot. So you're planning your interaction and you're practicing things before you're introducing them to the parrot. So having a treat in one hand and a clicker in another hand, just the physicality of that is pretty manageable, okay? You're right hand dominant, you put the clicker in your right hand and you have the treat in your left hand, whatever it is. When we're now integrating the target stick, the other kind of frustration I hear feedback on with customers is like it feels clumsy and clunky. Like they don't know how to hold the target stick and the clicker at the same time. So even though it's a small chopstick, like there is value in like going at such a slow pace that you're like, okay, we've introduced the clicker. Now let me practice what the target stick is and how to hold it and how to manipulate moving the target stick and clicking the clicker at the same time, yet still having the treat handy. Now, I think that's where we kind of can really make the link of why the clicker is so valuable. So if you're not overly coordinated or well practiced to be able to, like the Parrot Wizard does, where he's got the target stick, the clicker, and the treat all in one hand.
Yeah.
Like I can't even do that. I cannot hold all three things in one hand. I'm close, but it's hard to hold all three things in one hand and have them be ready to be offered to the parrot right away. So if you can only manage having the target stick in one hand and the clicker in the other hand, that's why the clicker is important, because you don't have the treat yet. The treat is still hopefully in a training pouch, so it's like super, super close. Or you've put a little table right next to you so you don't have to like do anything more than pick up a treat and then give it to the bird. But the target stick is meant to be touched by the parrot. Okay, so birds are curious by nature, or parrots are, okay? And if they're even just a little intimidated or just curious, most likely and now you don't want to shove the target stick like right in their face. Like you have to kind of like float it and hope that they kind of like use their natural curiosity to reach out and touch it. More often than not, they do. Mm-hmm. So you have to be ready with the clicker because you're trying not to like ruin your first introduction of the target stick. You want to make sure that like the first time that it touches the target stick, you're ready with the click. So that is why the clicker is so valuable, because you've made this association that the click means a reward is coming and that the bird did the correct behavior. So if you're prepped and ready and you kind of float, and remember the bird is still in the cage at this time. You're working with the target stick outside of the cage through the cage bars. If the moment the bird reaches out and puts its beak on the target stick and you click, you now have used the clicker as the bridge to let the parrot know that the treat is coming. So again, make sure you're ready before you start the interaction, because not to say that if you flub and mess it up, you can't go back and fix it. this is not meant to like discourage people if you've not done it maybe the most successful way in the past. But if we can do it right the first time, there's a lot of value in that. And because parrots are so stinking smart, like they register that information lightning fast. Mm-hmm. So if they've made a positive association with that clicker and they're seeing this as like a good thing, you're going to be able to exploit that target stick really, really rapidly if you do it well and accurately right off the bat.
And I think a general theme with training forever and in general, or even just doing anything with your parrot ever, is just confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people that are starting to get frustrated or disappointed with their training routine or just in general. Maybe they've had their bird for 7 months and the bird's still flailing around because it's so, a little scared of the situation. Is sometimes you do have to evaluate how are you feeling every time you're going up to the bird, and it really comes down to just confidence yourself.
Totally.
And physically, transferring that to just physicality is you don't want to be fumbling around, as Alexis was just saying, so in depth with your clicker or your target. You don't want to be sitting there trying in front of the bird trying to like, mess with it, and then it's falling down and clanking around, and it just really kind of transfers to your bird that your bird's like, what the heck is going on?
Yep.
This is not.
And going off what you said too, I mean, that level of confidence, part of why this training works so well, if we are confident and we have all our tools, is that same theme of predictability, because it does force us to stand up straight, tools in hand, treat in hand, like our body language, everything screams calm, confident, predictable. So we aren't moving fast and flailing our arms about in ways that we might normally do. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. Yeah.
And the reason I say that is from personal experience, because my very first interaction with Rascal was, and it was totally my fault. It 100% is usually always my fault or the person's fault. Mm-hmm. But I was bitten by Rascal on the finger. That was my first day. And I remember sitting in the showroom, because I haven't worked with parrots overly too much before I started here. Mm-hmm. And I go, hi, Rascal, hi, Rascal. And I did the wrong thing you don't do with parrots. And I put my hand in her face, and bam, she got me.
Yep.
And I remember you turned around. I was like, no, don't.
I mean, even if I'm standing next to her and I'm talking with my hands, I can see her kind of like, what are you doing?
I know.
So it's not just you.
But yet.
But it goes. Yeah. I started off on a rocky road, and then I had, of course, this mindset that it gave me, like, ooh, I got to be careful. And then, but I've just been, you got to work on the confidence. And now she steps up. Yeah. She runs over every time I give her water.
You have a great relationship with Rascal.
Hi. It's so funny. She's an amazing bird.
And it is just pure, like, that bird, Rascal specifically, like, in times where she knows what's going on, she is predictable. Mm-hmm. Like, I can pass her off to 2-year-olds to like 90-year-olds in a wheelchair where there's this intimidating object and it's shiny and it's metal, and these are scary scenarios that she's not necessarily used to. Kids are yelling and screaming, but because like she doesn't have a hand unexpectedly coming, and I'm watching that her entire world around her is like so like predictable, she's predictable. Mm-hmm. And so like, but she's such a good example. She does not mess around. Like if she feels that she needs to defend herself, like she will. Yeah. And it's just like it is a great example, because do you know the secret to not getting bit? Stop trying to touch the bird.
Don't put your hand right up in their face.
If you don't put your hand within its reach, it can't bite you. So it's just a great kind of like confidence builder, because like you're like, oh gosh, I can see now that like I invaded her space. Mm-hmm. I went too far with my hand. Like the whole point of this, like let her come to me. And now what we've trained you to do and why you're so successful for her now is because you now know that if you put your hand not up to her, but kind of down low and to the side, she will 100% walk over and willingly like come onto your hand.
Yeah.
So it's like this reverse engineering of like,
she's so cute. Yeah.
yeah, you don't even have to work to get her to step up. She just like, well, like, yeah, absolutely. Now I know what you're asking of me. I'm going to do that 100 times for you.
Yeah.
Because she's choosing it and we're not forcing her.
And that's what this training is about too, is giving the bird choice. Sure, there are times when they're going to choose, no, I'm not in the mood to train. We'll respect that and keep coming back to it. But doing these things, it's all about that predictability, that confidence, and that clarity. Like that seems to be the common theme here. And when we look at these tools, the tools help us to also carry those three things
Exactly.
as well.
I was going to say that's the point of a target stick is you're building the confidence. I mean, of course, you're directing your bird, which is the eventual goal, but you are building the confidence where you don't have to work with your hands right off the bat.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think personally, I should do a better goal, work better at it at the store by recommending target sticks, because a lot of people push target sticks off to the side and just go for the clicker, and then they wonder why maybe
I know it's hard because
it's
like
more difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to recommend people like it's hard because like we're trying to encourage people to more or less buy a lot of stuff, and it's like we don't care if you're buying it from us. That's not the thing. It's the thing is like all of the things we're recommending kind of are going to help you.
Tools.
So they're not really optional. You really need to invest in all of these things. And like, obviously you can use a chopstick. Chopsticks, you can get them for free. But I think people kind of are like, well, I don't need the target stick yet because well, yes, you're not going to introduce the target stick right away, but you do need it right away because you want to have it ready for when you do get to that next level.
Right.
And then one thing I want to circle back to with what you said, Ashley, about like the physicality of like how you're presenting your body if like you're starting to do the target and the clicker. And something that we don't mean to like giggle about it at the store, but it's a little funny because like humans are awkward and we do things weirdly sometimes. But even myself, I'm not saying I'm perfect because this is how I used to be too. Like when we want people to like hold a trained bird, like this is an example, trained bird, they're going to hold it for the first time. Like how everybody puts their elbows in the air to hold the birds. They're like militant. So like their elbows go straight up into the air. And we're like trying to always tell people like, put your elbows down. And like, even when you tell people to put their elbows down, they don't know like what you mean. Like they're like putting their elbows
in the back of my mind, like just nudging my elbow in.
I'm like,
when
put
I
your
first
elbow
started.
down.
I know.
I'm not as gentle sometimes.
It just kind of,
It works for me.
like,
you just kind of like push it in, like
push
now
the
it's
elbow in
natural.
there.
I literally have to tell children, I'm like, I'm going to touch your elbow now because I'm like, I tell them to put their elbow down and they don't. So I'm
do
like,
too.
I had to like poke their elbow in this place.
Yeah.
But it's because like you want to be as relaxed. So again, working to the future, the way that you hold the target stick and how you hold the clicker is going to be how you hold the bird. So you're like unintentionally training yourself or practicing for like the future steps way down the road. Because when you are working with the clicker and the target stick, you're standing up straight. Okay, you're facing the bird. Your elbows are down. You're in a totally neutral body stance. Yet when people want to work with birds, like their elbows go up and they get really rigid. And it's going to help kind of train you like, no, elbows down, shoulders relaxed, deep breath, relaxed face. It's like literally setting you up for future success because you're training your body to stay neutral and not get rigid or firm or like have your arms come out in a really predatory, intimidating way. And I mean, for all the reasons, you don't want the bird to like run onto your hand and go up to the shoulder or there's a lot of benefits to keeping your elbows down, but it's just practice for all those future steps. It's forcing you to like visualize this time or down the road, maybe 6 months to a year. I mean, it might take a long time, but when you're naturally standing with a bird or you watch people who hold birds all the time, they're super relaxed and their elbows are dropped. And it's that really relaxed energy is going to pass on to the bird too.
Even the physicality, especially we're talking about like when little kids come into the store and want to hold our black palm cockatoo, which, and you know, respect that birds in general are not the heaviest animals, but they still can have some weight with them, especially for little kids and the big cockatoos. And if your elbow is all the way up, like above your shoulder, your arm's going to shake.
Yep.
Because you're holding the thing that you're not used to holding. And then that shakiness, then the bird all of a sudden wants to get up to a solid ground and then starts climbing up real quick. And then the kid's like trying to get away but doesn't know what to do. And it's a whole cascade down into a negative interaction. And that's not just for kids either. I mean, adults
everybody.
too. Yeah. So it's just important to practice these things.
And you're using far less muscles. And so like for people who are listening and not watching us on YouTube, like what we're kind of describing is like when you're standing up and you're looking at your cell phone, like your elbows are dropped to your side. Okay. Or if you reach out for a handshake, your elbows more or less down at like your hip. Your elbow and your hip are very close. And again, the reason when we're holding our phones or our purses or going out to do a handshake, it's like we're not trying to use unnecessary muscles for those movements. It's just you don't need to. So yeah, it's gonna your strength is in your back and your like upper body. And if you don't have to engage your arm muscles, like you're gonna have way more stamina holding the slightly bigger, even little birds. Like just if you have to hold them for a while, like say we're down the road and we're like in a harness and we're gonna go for a walk around the block, like you gotta
if your elbows out there. Yeah.
And because we don't want them riding on the shoulder, like it's gonna be on your hand. So like start picturing those things early in those very beginning clicker training sessions because it's all gonna build on each other. And again, going back to the foundation, you're laying the foundation for long-term success.
Once we start introducing that target, at this point, we're still talking about in-cage training. And I like how you mentioned kind of hovering it in front of the bird or on the peripheral. We're not shoving the target at them or anything intimidating. I like to use the command touch when I'm doing it. I say touch. When the bird touches the target, I click, I reward. Once we've done that a couple times with the bird, sometimes people are like, where do I go from there? And we can do kind of what we did with our treats between the bars and lure the bird, to different areas of the cage, getting them to touch that target. That's a great way to just begin what you'll do out of the cage when you do get to that T stand. And you're, again, getting the bird really comfortable with what the target's about, moving towards us. I know when Parrot Wizard did his presentation at the workshop we had on that Friday night dinner, he even talked about for some folks, if you have a bird that is a little more nervous when you're changing food and water, you can target them to the other side of the cage, change that food and water. Then you don't risk the bird panicking and coming out. So this is a tool that if you do start using it, has so many applications, not just step up or let's do some tricks. You can do a lot with it.
You're introducing your hand in a slow manner that isn't right off the bat your hand.
Yes.
And we use ringnecks so much, and I kind of feel bad about it, but it's just kind of who they are.
Yeah.
Because they're very shy birds in general. That's just a general pattern. But ringnecks, when you even act like you're going to move your hand towards the cage, a lot of them are like, they're just, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. That's just who they are. But the target stick is a way to do that in a slow manner where they feel safe. So
even with the really little guys, I know budgies tend to be pretty flighty. They're not ones that, we only have surrendered budgies at our store, but being tinier and usually being surrenders, they might not have always had the best care coming to us. But I know the folks who have adopted them that have developed a hands-on relationship really leaned on that target and that in-cage training because these little guys, they're tiny, maybe have been inappropriately grabbed or handled in their past experiences. So when we have people, even with the really little birds, using that target, it helps so much with that bird's confidence and just seeing, again, the predictability of that human, that hand isn't just reaching in and grabbing them.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we just want to reiterate, like, this tool is meant to all be introduced while the parrot is still inside the cage. Like, we've now had 3 full podcast episodes of, like, how to start training, and we haven't even gotten close to the point where the bird's coming out of the cage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know it's like a hard pill to swallow sometimes for customers, because we mentioned it in the last episode, but you're getting a pet and they're called pets, like to touch them. Like there's so much association with like the physicality or like that gratification of like love and touch and like engagement with your parrot. And the person has spent money and time and effort and so much emotion to bring this animal home, or like they've put so much effort into reigniting an existing relationship that like I know it's so hard and we're just going to keep saying it and saying it and saying it throughout this podcast, but like the best thing you can do is just leave it in its cage to start and let it choose to engage with you.
Yes.
Don't force it. You can't. It's going to result in so much of a stronger relationship and trust if you just take it slow. So just again, we're just trying to help you guys identify all of the valuable tools, give you the resources to start over or to start new with a companion parrot so that you don't feel the frustration or the disappointment if things aren't going at the pace that you anticipated or at the pace that a friend or family member got to go with their companion parrot.
Yeah.
It's okay to allow them the safety and security of their cage, assuming again that it's like the right size and it's got plenty of enrichment and good perching, and good diet and all that. But like, it's okay. I know it's like I just keep saying it over and over again, but the reason we're doing this podcast is like, we're in a little bit of a unique situation that like we sell companion parrots. And even though we spend, hours with every single family, like required hours, like it's a minimum of 2 hours, every single family minimum, sometimes far, far more than 2 hours are spent, like upwards of 15 to 20 hours before that bird is leaving us. Yet people still call back, and it's okay. We want to encourage. We are not trying to discourage people from calling back and seeking advice. That's the whole point of all of this. But when people do call back, it's the questions that we ask, like, okay, they're struggling. Why are they struggling? More often than not, it's because they've let the bird out of the cage. They've tried touching it. It won't step up. It doesn't like the sibling or the spouse. And it's like, whoa, guys.
Yeah.
We're here for you. We will support you. We're not passing judgment. But we are like 20 steps beyond what we should be at 1 or 2 weeks into this. Sometimes even customers at 6 months call us. And it's like, okay, well, take us back. What was the week 1, week 2 like? And they're like, well, at week 1 and week 2 were great. The bird was coming out. It was stepping up. And it's like, well, okay, maybe that specific bird was really outgoing, but it was like way too much too soon. There was no boundary built.
Yeah.
It was basically a free-for-all. Birds are highly intelligent. They can figure out very quickly how to manipulate their surroundings to get exactly what they want out of every situation. So even if you have a parrot that like is quote unquote wanting to come out to you right away, it doesn't mean you should let them. It still has to be a foundation built in positive reinforcement training so that you don't end up with a very confident bird that goes up to your cabinets and rips them apart, and you can't get them down because you've not taught them to step up even if they don't want to.
Right.
They don't have any motivation to. So if they're not in the mood, they won't. So you have to really look at it from all different perspectives and say, okay, really, what am I trying to achieve with this parrot? And like reassure yourself or tell yourself over and over again, like it's worth the wait.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's one of the last things we tell every single customer during our take-home checklist portion of the send-home process is in bold all caps with 2 exclamation marks. Take it slow.
Take it slow.
It's just the end. So if they remember nothing, which shouldn't be the case, but if that's the deal, it's one of the last things they do remember about, what to do with the bird. Just take it slow.
Take it slow.
Yeah.
It really is that marathon that you're always describing, not a sprint. They're so long-lived, such intelligent animals. If we can't be hands-on right away, first weeks, months, year, maybe even, it's a drop in the bucket compared to that long lifespan and all that hands-on activity that we can have if we go slow, if we do it right, and that bird chooses to be with us. It's all
Absolutely.
about that autonomy.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, we do understand that every situation, every household, and every bird, and every human being is pretty unique. So, I mean, we'd love to take like emails or calls
Absolutely.
at the store because we love helping people out with their bird. So just talk to us.
Yeah. So in the show notes, there's an option to like send us a text message and we receive it in like the form of an email. So we can respond to people that are reaching out and asking for advice. I mean, we're probably going to recommend very similar steps to what we've described. But if you have a very specific scenario, like Avery just said, like maybe we can offer you a different perspective, or you can email us a quick picture or video of your setup so we can help you decide, like, are there modifications that we could make to kind of make the environment better for your training sessions? That's the whole point. We're here to just help you guys.
Yeah.
Totally. So it's a team effort.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to our little clicker training series and continuing to support our podcast. As always, of course, if you have questions about the topics, reach out. But if you can rate or review our podcast or download each episode, it really does help us. We're putting in a lot of time and effort into creating this podcast for you guys with the intention or the hope that we're reaching a good size audience. And the more feedback we get on our podcast, the more the platforms are going to like share our podcast with new listeners. So it really does make a difference when you guys take that extra moment to rate and review. We really do appreciate it more than you know. We sit there, we see all of it on like our little stats sheets. And each time we see a new review or a good rating, it really like it just gives us that little extra boost. So we really appreciate it. But as always, everybody,
Be kind to your parrot, and your parrot will be kind to you.
all right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.